Residual tension. Fighting resurfaces in Gaza. Despite declarations of peace, they said the war was over. Cameras captured smiles, flags were raised, and the world, weary of tragedies, believed. But those who lived under the sound of sirens knew silence was not peace, it was a pause. The dust had barely settled when the same skies that promised calm once again burned with fire and fear. Gaza became the portrait of a cruel paradox, where talk of reconstruction is as casual as counting the dead. It's strange to think that, in the 21st century, peace still needs translation. While leaders speak of hope, drones continue to hover over the ruins, and mothers still weep over bodies covered in makeshift sheets. The truth is, there's a vast distance between the end of the fighting and the end of the war. It's one thing to cease fire, it's another to cease hatred, and no one has been able to disarm that. Perhaps this is what is so frightening. Realizing that peace could be the new battlefield, a war waged with words, treaties, and interests masked by goodwill. Gaza exposes what the world insists on hiding, that humanity has not yet learned to live without enemies. And while the planet applauds the talk of peace, the ashes of an uncomfortable truth rise from the ground, that a ceasefire has never been the same as an end to fear. The silence that precedes chaos. Immediately after the ceasefire was announced, Gaza seemed suspended in time. The dusty streets, marked by debris and the bitter smell of smoke, gave way to an uneasy silence. The kind of silence that doesn't bring relief, but rather foreboding. Families timidly emerged from their homes, looking up at the sky as if still fearful of the sound of sirens. It was an attempt to start over in a land that, though silent, still breathed tension around every corner. Some merchants reopened their doors, pushing open the metal gates with wavering hope. Curious children played among the rubble, unable to grasp the weight of what they called peace. And while the world celebrated the end of the war with grandiose speeches, the local people felt that the real danger lay not just in the bombs, but in the uncertainty of what would come next. Because in Gaza, the post-war period always feels more like a pause between storms. A foreign journalist once described the peace there as sounding like an echo, distant, brief, and illusory. It's the kind of silence that deceives the unwary, but alerts those who have experienced this cycle before. It's in this gap between fear and hope that the first cracks appear, small gestures, glances, nocturnal noises that announce that something, inevitably, is about to begin again. The cracks in the agreement. While world leaders exchanged handshakes in front of the cameras, away from the spotlight, reality proved far more fragile. The peace agreement, celebrated with fiery speeches and promises of reconstruction, was already fraught with suspicion. Rival factions interpreted clauses differently, and each side saw the ceasefire not as an end to the war, but as a strategic pause. In the corridors of power, signed documents were worth less than the suspicious glances between generals and ministers. Behind the scenes, political analysts warned, peace is only as strong as the interests of those who sustain it. And in Gaza, interests rarely converge. Some groups saw the treaty as surrender, others as a sham. The result was a fragile alliance, sustained by promises no one intended to keep. It was like building a castle on quicksand, beautiful from afar, unstable up close. All it took was a rumor, a gunshot, a provocation for everything to collapse again. And the rumor mill didn't last long. Intercepted messages, suspicious movements, and fiery speeches began to circulate like sparks in a powder keg. The weary people realized what politicians pretended to ignore. Imposed peace never heals open wounds. And in the shadows of this supposed truce, something invisible, unsettling, grew. The omen that the silence was about to be broken again. The return of confrontations. No one knew for sure who fired first. It was a single, almost insignificant bang that echoed through the streets and brought back a familiar fear. Within minutes, what had been just a rumor became reality. Sirens, running, smoke rising into the sky again. The windows that had been reopened were hurriedly closed. The air, which had once carried the scent of freshly baked bread, now had the metallic taste of gunpowder. Peace, once again, was showing its expiration date. On local radio stations, newscasters tried to remain calm as they announced new bombings. People ran to makeshift shelters, holding their children by the hand, their eyes fixed on the ground, as if staring at the horizon were too dangerous. Each explosion seemed to repeat the same phrase: "We're back to the beginning." It was the cycle of destruction beginning again with almost mathematical precision. The truce had been merely a parenthesis, and now the text of the war continued to be written, line by line. A volunteer doctor, amid the chaos, said something that stuck. The war never went away, it just dozed off, and perhaps he was right. Because in Gaza, time seems to move in circles, with each rebuilding a new ruin, with each embrace a new morning. Yet amid the ruins, there were those who lit a candle, those who said a prayer. Because even amid the chaos, human beings insist on believing that a new dawn is still possible. The information war. With the sound of bombs came another kind of explosion, that of conflicting news, posts, and versions. Each side claimed the truth, transforming the war into a digital spectacle. Within hours, videos, audio, and statements popped up on social media, some real, others carefully manipulated. Information, once a weapon of enlightenment, became ammunition for confusion. The battle was no longer fought solely with rifles, but with hashtags, algorithms, and strategically calculated headlines. Foreign newspapers depicted dramatic scenes, but omitted what didn't fit into their narratives. Influencers, seated in comfortable armchairs thousands of miles away, commented on the conflict as if it were a strategy game. The truth was diluted by rhetoric and vested interests, to the point where no one knew who was truly the aggressor or the oppressed. And in this invisible war, whoever shouted the loudest prevailed, even if they lied with conviction. A veteran reporter compared the situation to a digital chessboard, where every media move is more important than the advance of the troops. "Today, whoever controls the narrative wins," he said. And that's why, even when the fire stops, the chaos continues, fueled by words, images, and the power to manipulate mass emotions. Because sometimes, the most dangerous war is the one that takes place on screens, not in the streets. International interference. While Gaza burned, the corridors of the great powers simmered in silence. Each country reacted with measured speeches and hidden agendas. Some publicly condemned but secretly supplied weapons. Others spoke of humanitarian intervention, while calculating strategic gains on the map of global power. The war at this point ceased to be local. It became a planetary chess game, where every move, every alliance, every veto had less to do with compassion and more to do with control. The United States, for example, pressed for stability to protect its agreements and bases in the region. Russia watched coldly, seeing the chaos as an opportunity to reposition its influence. Europe, torn between guilt and pragmatism, talked of peace but sold military technology. And the UN, as so often before, seemed merely a helpless spectator to the diplomatic spectacle. Behind every flag raised lay a geopolitical calculation and a survival strategy. A veteran diplomat, when asked about the chances of peace, responded sarcastically, "Peace is of no interest to those who profit from fear." This phrase, delivered in an almost casual tone, reveals the essence of the problem. Because while international aid arrives with colorful logos and promises of reconstruction, the real fuel of the conflict continues to be negotiated in air-conditioned rooms, far from the sound of sirens. And so Gaza remains a stage, not only for war, but for power. The human face of the crisis in the makeshift shelters. The sound of explosions no longer causes the same shock. It's as if the body has grown accustomed to the pain. A mother tries to calm her son by covering his ears, while softly singing an old song that speaks of hope. In another corner, an elderly man holds a yellowed portrait, the last reminder of those left under the rubble. It is there, in the simplicity of these gestures, that war shows its true face. Not in the tanks, but in the eyes of those who have lost everything and still insist on carrying on, NGOs arrive with blankets, medicine, and words of comfort, but no one has a cure for the trauma. Children draw planes and bombs with crayons as if they were a natural part of childhood. A local psychologist once remarked, "War teaches before school. It's cruel, but real." Because growing up amid fear is learning to distrust the future. Still, even amidst ruins, there are those who set up small schools, improvise churches, or distribute bread. Small acts of resistance in the form of faith. And it is this faith, however fragile it may seem, that keeps Gaza alive. It cannot be explained by logic or politics. It is born from the love of those who care for others, even when there is nothing to offer. It is a faith that defies chaos, that clings to life like a stubborn flame in the wind. Perhaps in the end, this is what the powerful never understood, that behind every war, there is a people who resist not out of hatred, but out of love. The illusion of peace in political discourse, the word peace shines like a divine promise. But in Gaza, it sounds like a bitter irony. Each signing of a new treaty rekindles hope, and at the same time, the fear of the next failure. It's a concept too beautiful to fit the reality of those who live among ruins. For the people, peace doesn't come in agreements. It comes in brief moments like the silence between two explosions, the laughter of a child, or the shared coffee at dawn. Everything else seems like a rehearsal for the next conflict. In palaces and conferences, leaders talk of reconstruction, but the ground they tread has never seen the dust of Gaza. They celebrate goals and development plans, while the people celebrate when water arrives for a few hours. It's a cruel disconnect. The peace of the powerful is statistical, that of the people, survival. And so the entire world continues to believe that speeches are enough to heal wounds that have bled for generations. The illusion is too comfortable to be abandoned, but some realize that the true battlefield may not be geographic, but internal. Because the war that destroys homes begins in the small wars that man wages within himself. Hatred, pride, the thirst for power. As long as these enemies remain alive, any peace will be but a temporary disguise. And perhaps the day Gaza finally sleeps in silence will not be the end of a political conflict, but the beginning of a human transformation. In the end, Gaza becomes more than a disputed territory. It is a mirror of the world itself, a reminder that war never starts out of nowhere and never truly ends. Before the bombs, there are always fiery speeches, unlikely alliances, and calculated silences. History repeats its signs, but few are willing to see them. And it is precisely in this collective blindness that tragedies prepare to be born again, with new flags and old motives. Perhaps the right question isn't, when will there be peace? But when will we learn to recognize it before it disappears? Every conflict brings subtle signals, troop movements, economic manipulations, hate speech disguised as patriotism. Those who understand these signs aren't caught off guard when chaos erupts. And understanding is, in a sense, resisting. Therefore, if you want to understand what happens behind the scenes of conflicts and learn to identify the 10 signs that a war is about to start, don't wait for the next boom. Seek knowledge now. Click and get it free ebook, 10 Signs That a War is About to Start. A revealing guide that opens your eyes to what the news hasn't yet told you. Because seeing things before others do is often the only way to survive what's to come.